Let's open up with a prayer. Dear Father, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know for an open mind and a new experience. Please help me to release all fear and closed-mindedness. Please help me to release all ideas I have about you, about A Course in Miracles, about love, about forgiveness, about everything, God. Please fill my mind with your truth. Please help me to be a conduit of love and light in this world, God. Thank you. Amen. I am in A Course in Miracles, our beautiful purple book based on the original handwritten notes of Helen, the complete and annotated edition. I am currently in a group called the Course Companions, so I am reading my reading assignments with you, and I am turning to the Cameo 3, which is in the back of the book. So let me find that. We are on day 5, Cameo 3. It's Cameo 2. I'm getting closer. Here we are. Cameo 3. You must love the children and help them. Following Miracle Principle 16, Jesus gave Helen an extended discourse on her need to help and heal particular people in her life. In the process, he painted a picture of the overall arc of her soul's journey, from the ancient past to the present. Helen, regarding Wally's chalice. Does this mean he is on my list? We're going to go down here and read 1. All quotations without page numbers in this cameo are from Helen's notes. Throughout these cameo essays, we have corrected spelling errors in the notes for ease in reading. All right. This seems to be a reference to an earlier portion of Helen's notes, in which she wrote to Bill, "Last night I was planning to type up the course for you, but was strictly ordered not to go back to it before I got over Wally. This morning I did ask for help with Wally. The answer seems to lie in points 6 and 7. That's why he gave me the chalice for Wally. It belongs to him, but he cannot find it." Wally was a friend of Bill's whom Helen intensely disliked. She at one point wrote, "I feel extremely negative toward him, and I insist that he's a bad influence on Bill. And I think he's a real menace to me." Kenneth Wapnick, Ph.D., Absence from Felicity, The Story of Helen Schuckman and Her Scribing of A Course in Miracles. Temecula, California, Foundation for A Course in Miracles. The person that Wapnick refers to as S here is Wally. Jesus clearly regards this dislike as a key obstacle for Helen, since he returns to it again and again. Here she is strictly ordered by him not to go back over the course until she gets over Wally. Later, Jesus tells her that she must let go of that thing about Wally. Finally, he tells her that the reason she hates Wally is because he shares her trait of being embarrassed by love, but just expresses it differently than she does. She is thus projecting onto him her own self-hatred over this same trait in herself. And don't we all have our own Wally? In stark contrast to Helen's hatred, Jesus has given her the chalice to give to Wally. This is clearly a reference to the chalice of atonement, the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper. Drinking from the chalice thus symbolizes taking the atonement into oneself. In other words, it symbolizes reconciliation with God. This reconciliation belongs to Wally, but he cannot find it. hence the need for Helen to give it to him. But how can she do this? The answer seems to be in points, Miracle Principles 6 and 7. Principle 6 implies that before Helen can give Wally a miracle, purification is necessary first. She must purify her mind of her hatred. Principle 7 says that miracles supply a lack and are performed by those who have more for those who have less. Helen, then, is in a position of spiritually having more than Wally, and out of this abundance she can supply his lack. The word that seems to be hovering around the edges here is forgiveness, a word that is closely associated with atonement. If Helen can forgive Wally, she will purify her own mind and supply the innocence he seems to lack. This mirrors something Helen said earlier in a letter to Bill. She reported that Wally was very anxious to give her a necklace, saying, "I knew that if I should accept it from him, it would represent a symbol that I have forgiven him, which he needs so much." 3. That's from Absence of Felicity. This is what Helen needs to offer and Wally needs to receive, her forgiveness. Jesus now answers Helen's question about Wally being on her list. Not necessarily, only some words crossed out, possibly including "be patient." You of all people should know that it frightens people if you hand them back their own chalice. Whether he is or not depends on three-way readiness. I am always ready. Your job is to take care of your readiness. His readiness is up to him. At present, he is a potential candidate. Oh, there's the asterisk. I was wondering. All right, but Amy is on it now. She is a child you hurt. And then I'm going to go back here because you of all people should know that it frightens people if you hand back their own chalice. And then there's the asterisk. The whole problem is that they threw it away and are denying it. Therefore, they are now afraid of it. This should cause you no trouble at all in understanding. The fact that Amy is on Helen's list seems to dovetail with the dream Helen had in which Amy's mother suddenly left the girl in Helen's care. Helen, as a result, felt trapped and was trying not to get angry because she wanted to rest after a tiring day, but couldn't on account of Amy. In light of the comments about Wally and Amy, Helen's chalice list seems to be a list of people to whom she is supposed to give the chalice of atonement. People who have lost touch with their chalice due to their own choices and due to Helen's unkindness. This latter point is implied when Jesus says, "But Amy is on it now. She is a child you hurt." As we'll soon see, this hurt may have occurred in a time before the present life. Individuals must, however, fulfill a key condition before they are put on the list. They must be ready to receive their chalice back. They must no longer be afraid of it. It is clear that people in Helen's life are at various stages of achieving this readiness. Amy is apparently ready now. Chip, as we'll soon see, is almost ready, and Wally, it seems, is not ready yet. At present, he is a potential candidate. In all of these cases, their readiness is up to them. Helen, therefore, needs to focus on her own readiness so that she can be an instrument of Jesus who is always ready. Is Helen the only one with a list like this? We see in Cameo 1 that Bill seems to have had his own chalice list. In material that was written about a week before the current material, Helen referred several times to Bill's list or his own list. This was apparently a list of people, Joe Armstrong being mentioned in connection with it, who were supposed to be identified by guidance. This, of course, sounds strikingly similar to what Helen now calls my list, which is also a list of people who are being identified for by her who are being identified for her by guidance. So Helen and Bill both seem to have had their own chalice lists, which of course raises the possibility that this is a general phenomenon, not limited to the two of them. It raises the possibility, in other words, that we all have a chalice list. Jesus now continues. You both have an identification problem which makes you unstable, but in different ways. He lacks confidence in his identification and needs to strengthen it. You vacillate in your identification and need better control. Both of you needn't worry. This will become a frequent theme in Jesus' comments about Helen's and Bill's respective problems. Bill's problem is weakness. He lacks confidence in himself. Helen, in contrast, is strong but needs stability. She uses her strength to charge confidently off in opposite directions at different times. As Jesus says later, your perception is so variable that you swing from sudden but real knowledge to complete cognitive disorganization. Jesus now returns to Helen's need to help others. You must love the children and help them. You have hated them and hurt them, but remember, Azra, that you once loved them very much. You were a child of light. Forget the interval of darkness and be what you were. That is your real self. Chip's story triggered the abandonment of the children, guilt, and a fear of God's abandonment as justice. I told you I forgave you, and that meant all hurt and hate you have ever expressed is canceled. I need the children of light now, and I am calling you to be what you once were and must be again. The interval has vanished without a trace anywhere. You who live so close to God must not give way to guilt. The karmic law demands abandonment for abandoning, but you have received mercy, not justice. Help the children because you love them and love God. Remember, a miracle is a spark of life. It shines through the darkness and brings in the light. You must begin to forget and remember. Jesus is clearly referring to a past life of Helen's in which he says she was a child of light who loved the children very much. By calling this past identity Azra, he is possibly identifying Helen as the biblical scribe Ezra, sometimes spelled Azra. Ezra means help or helper and may be an abbreviation of, I'm not even going to try to read that, meaning God helps. Interestingly, Jesus here not only enjoins Helen several times to help the children, but he also will later call her God's help. You, who will be God's help, are clearly in need of help. Ezra was a Jewish scribe and priest who had been called to a second Moses. He led 5,000 Jews back from exile in Babylon to Jerusalem, where he reconstituted the Jewish community based on strict observance and learned interpretation of the Torah. It is not hard to see echoes of this in Helen's current role as a scribe, who would bring forth a new scripture that would attract a global following. Jesus' message here is that in this past life, whether this was as the scribe Ezra or someone else, she expressed her real self. Later he implies, in this life Helen was surrendered to God's will and enjoyed a high level of communication with him. 4. See Cameo 7. I'm just going to wait until I get there. All right, so where was I? 4. There it is. Yet, however holy it was, that lifetime seems to have vanished into the distant past. It seems to have been blotted out by an interval of darkness that came after, in which Helen's hate in which Helen hated, hurt, and abandoned the children, thus causing her to fear God's abandonment as her just deserts. Jesus' liberating message, though, is that all of that darkness has now vanished without a trace anywhere. Jesus forgave her, and that meant all hurt and hate you have ever expressed is canceled. Loving mercy has replaced karmic justice. A miracle has shined away the interval of darkness. Now all that remains is the light she expressed in her life as Azra. All of the obstacles to reuniting with that light have disappeared. She can forget everything else and remember the light, because the light is all that remains. This is a private point just for you. It is not part of the course. A miracle is love. You always wanted presents, and a closed package was intolerable. Please open this one. You act like it's a time bomb. When I said a miracle abolishes time, Miracle Principle 13, you might look back and review the point in parentheses. In Miracle Principle 15, it will cease when it is no longer useful in facilitating learning. You are afraid there won't be enough time for you. Forget it and remember that there is no real difference between an instant and an eternity. Yes, okay. So I'm going to read that again because I feel like I blurbed it together. You act like it's a time bomb. When I said a miracle abolishes time, you might look back and review that point in parentheses. You're afraid there won't be enough time for you. Forget it and remember there is no real difference between an instant and eternity. Okay. Jesus is urging Helen to open this present that he is giving her, the Course, even though she regards it as a time bomb. Then he implies it is a time bomb, since after all it abolishes time. She is afraid this abolishment of time won't leave her with enough time, which is why she reported being afraid when she wrote the earlier parenthetical remark about time ceasing. But then how can there not be enough time when each instant is really eternity? Jesus now returns to the theme of healing the children. I have healed the children you hurt before, but I have some I need your help in healing now. Remember that there is no order in miracles because they are always maximal expressions of love. You did make a maximal effort for Chip, and the only reason you did it was because you loved Bill. You might tell him to think about that sometimes, because he does need signs of love, but he does not always recognize them because he does not have enough confidence. His statement that I have healed children you hurt before helpfully clarifies what he meant earlier when he said that he canceled all the hurt she has ever expressed. But now he calls her to join him in his endeavor to become his instrument of healing. I have some I need your help in healing now. This, of course, is why she has the chalice list. To make clear that he is not asking of her something beyond her strength, Jesus reminds Helen that in certain respects she is already doing this. As an example, he points out that she did make a maximal effort for Chip, a longtime friend of Bill's, because of her love of Bill. In doing so, Jesus says she was actually demonstrating the first principle of miracles, which rests on the idea that miracles are maximal expressions of love. In other words, she was performing a miracle, in this case for both Chip and Bill. This, in fact, is just the kind of sign of love that Bill needs. Helen, however, probably needs to call his attention to it, since his lack of confidence blinds him to the love that he is actually receiving. We don't know the details of what Helen did for Chip, but this may be the same incident Jesus describes later. But you did get Chip over his misperceptions of Wally with very credible integrity. 5. See Cameo 4. We're almost there. Or it may be another instance of Helen helping Chip, one that she recorded in her notebooks the day before the course started coming through. In this story, she was having a session with Chip in which he recounted a series of episodes with his father, which she said were really awful, and which clearly emphasized that his father was a bastard. Helen then sought to move him towards some kind of healing. I said a prayer for him and then asked him why he obviously wanted to hang on to what was obviously real and very intense hatred. I was quite surprised with how quickly he got the idea that he was doing this part, aside from whatever his father had to answer for, which was a very different issue. Chip said he wanted to get rid of this, and meant it too, after I said, why don't you just release him from this because you don't need it? And Chip said he wants to let his father rest in peace, and also find salvation for himself, with which this was interfering. This clearly fits the definition of miracle in the Course, an expression of love from one person that has a healing effect on another. Whatever specific event Jesus is referring to in saying, you did make a maximal effort for Chip, it is clear that Helen is really trying to be a miracle worker with Chip, and not just with him. Jesus now returns to Helen's efforts on Bill's behalf. You practically gave up your life for him, Bill, quite voluntarily. But you did not know then that what you were really giving up was death. This is what in dying you live really means. And I said myself,